of all, I'm Sarah Threlfall, Director at Brightspace Events. And just to give you a quick run through as to why I'm here talking to you today, I'm historically was an event director, so worked in large agencies and set up then Brightspace Events about 6 years ago. And throughout that time, I was leading on large projects, doing the risk assessments, and getting involved with everything and anything about turning a event into a reality. So I had lots of experience of writing, carrying out risk assessments, and also working with health and safety specialists for anything that was, much larger or more complex. Since lockdown, I have been studying myself and trying to formalise all that knowledge into qualifications. So I've now got several certifications with IOSH, and I'm waiting for my final results for my NEBOSH National General Certificate. So that's an internationally recognised qualification that puts me as an occupational health and safety professional. So with that, those two things combined, I wanted to be advising my clients, and in fact, I have been advising my clients now on how to operate their events in a COVID secure way. So I've been very focused on this is how we take a live event, and this is the whole planning process about making it work in our new environment. So it's about kind of a holistic approach. It's not just an end risk assessment. It's about taking my experience of all the different events, all the different clients, all the different industries, and putting that to really good use and helping clients design safe events. So what we're doing today is a little bit different to the things I've done before. So if you've come to my previous webinars, then this does have a bit of a different focus, because I felt now that we've kind of launched a bit further into our steps, it was a good chance to look at what we're actually allowed to do, what is coming in the next steps of the legislation, and then there's a little section at the end where I get my crystal ball out and we start having a chat about what we think it might end up looking like, with huge disclaimers that it is just a crystal ball. But yeah, so that's kind of how we'll flow through today. So what I'll do first of all is share my screen with you, just to give you some reference points and also to help me keep track, so we don't have that long, and I don't want to overrun. And like I said, I do want to give you some time for questions. So let me do that now. So hopefully, if you can give me a thumbs up, you can see my slide. Yes, excellent. Okay. The other thing that I've been doing whilst consulting with my clients and going on site with them is creating training courses that cover all of this good stuff. So I will talk a bit more about those at the end. The other thing I've got very involved in is doing lots of these kind of things, webinars, either that we've organised or that other people have invited me to attend. And this basically stems from a brilliant one that I did a couple of weeks ago. It was organised by MiceBook. So Chetan Shah invited me to come on with a lawyer who specialises in compliance and legislation and all the real, nitty gritty. And also another guy, Raphael Hardy, who is an absolute health and safety legislation expert. He had 99 pages of legislation in front of him and was, oh yes, well that's section 7. So he was brilliant on all of this stuff. So where I can answer questions based on me, I will, but I may occasionally need to just refer to and get back to you if there's something really specific. But this is kind of where it all came from. And what we did was we've managed to come up with a grid that summarizes really what's allowed and what's coming down the steps. Now, this is based on a combination of the new legislation. So it's the Public Health Coronavirus Restrictions Steps England Regulations 2021. So bearing in mind this is based on England rules, it is different in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. It's a combination of that, the guidance that the government have issued, which I'll talk about in a second, and also something that's been issued again by the government to councils. So local councils who are who currently, and again we talk about this in a second, they currently have the power, you know, yay or nay, is this event going to happen? So it's guidance to them about what is permitted and what isn't. So there's some extra detail that we've been able to add, which is great. The couple of key points here are that it massively depends on who you are and what you are and where you are as to what you can do. So there's some really specific exceptions, and there's some really specific allowances. A good example is Showrounds. So some of them are allowed and some of them are not. It depends if it's a business event or if the venue is open, blah, blah, blah. So there's lots of interconnecting, kind of like a Venn diagram, you know, different things come into play depending on who and what you are. So you need to be very clear about who and what you are to make sure that you've got no clashes, basically. So the headline really is that the steps progress is all these dates are no earlier than, and they are dependent on 4 tests that the government must meet in order to progress. They're the vaccine rollout, the vaccine efficacy, so is it working, infection rates in the general population, and then number 4 is variants of concern. So they're the things that could scupper us, but so far we're on track. This is based on the legislation, which is currently issued and valid until the 30th of June, but really only goes into detail about what is allowed in the current step, so step 2. So we do have a bit of a gap, which is what are we going to be allowed to do in 3 and 4. But we are hoping that guidance will start to fill those gaps in. And this legislation, they've committed to reviewing every 5 weeks. So we'll keep our eyes on it and see if anything changes. So if we now take a look at the actual content, the first thing to note is that what we are currently allowed to do and what we are pretty much historically always allowed to do, no matter what the lockdown situation, is that you are allowed to have a business meeting if it is essential and if it cannot be done from home. Now, there's a very high bar for what that kind of includes, but if there's a genuinely essential business meeting or training that you can't do from home, that is allowed in a fully COVID compliant, COVID secure way. The other thing that is always allowed, as historically, is that filming without an audience. So, and it also is an exception for venues to open for filming without an audience. So there's a few kind of things that tend to be allowed no matter which version of these regulations we're in. But more specifically, at the moment, inspections is really the only thing we're allowed for business meetings. Indoor events, apart from that exception, is a no. Private dining is a no. Some outdoor events are allowed now, as long as they're not going to involve any congregations. So if there's no central stage, no activity that everybody will kind of gather around, then outdoor events are okay. So things like food festivals, where people just come in and wander around, but again, with full COVID secure measures and COVID secure risk assessment behind them. So that doesn't really help people who are trying to organise events. The interesting bit for us is when we hit step 3. So 17th of May, no earlier than the 17th of May, there's this anticipation that we're going to go from 0 to hero, nothing, to 1,000 people or 50% of the venue's capacity, depending on, where you are, basically. That will still be with social distancing measures and, as it stands at the moment, the COVID secure guidance with face masks still required, and a full risk assessment and all of the protocols that we've got used to in place. And the same number kind of applies all the way down. So the good news is they have said that the limits are for business meetings, any indoor event. So they're not just saying, well, it's business only. So it is more social events, and more specifically, private dining and gala dinners. Now, a lot of the time, they've often been excluded from what we were allowed to do, but they are now hopefully going to be included in this opening up, which is a big difference and a real boost, I think, for a lot of people. So the thing that's happening between then and now is the first, or the only rather, business test event. So it's been confirmed at the ACC in Liverpool on the 28th of April. So it's not that long, not that far away. The Good Business Festival, which is going to be a conference for 1,000 people. So they've gone straight in. Quite why they couldn't have done something for 200 and released us a bit earlier for smaller numbers, I don't know. That would make too much sense. But they're kind of going all in for this 1,000 people format. Now, they've confirmed recently they're not going to be doing vaccine certification for that, but they are going to be doing lateral flow testing before the event and then after the event. I'm currently digging away to try and find out more, but that's what we've got so far. So that's an interesting precedent, I think, for where they could be guiding us when we do reopen. So then if all that goes to plan and they're happy with how the pilots went and they're happy with how things are going post 17 May, plus all the other tests, plus the 4 tests, we move into step 4. Now I cover, like I said, my crystal ball bit later. But at step 4, the commitment they have made is to lift all legal restrictions on gatherings. All legal restrictions are going to be lifted on, or no earlier than the 21st of June. The legal restrictions are not the same as the mitigations that we have in place currently to reduce the risk of transmission. The legal restrictions put numbers and limits and what's on that grid. The mitigations that we have in place, events and the protocols that we have, things like face masks, things like the social distancing, are covered in it's different bits of the legislation, it's different bits of the regulations. And the government have said that they will review the need for social distancing as part of step 4. They haven't committed to removing it. So I'm already jumping into my crystal ball area, but I just wanted to cover that now. We will look at it in a bit more detail. Now, before I move on to the next bit, the small print there, it's not all the small print, as you can imagine, it's just the big small print. So there is a fuller document that has even more caveats and that sort of stuff on the MySpit website. But we're hoping we're going to get more detailed legislation. We're hoping we're going to get more detailed guidance as we get closer to those open up dates. The numbers don't include staff, workers or volunteers. And it does say at step 2 or 3 that events cannot take place if it is unlikely that social distancing can't be maintained. So very much still on social distancing at step 2 and 3. And then step 4 is with appropriate mitigations in place, the government aims to remove all legal limits. Does apply in England only, and all events must comply with COVID safe guidelines and have a risk assessment. Okay, the local authority currently and until the 17th of July have the authority to close down an event at their whim, I'm afraid. I'll cover that in a second, but that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so that hopefully gives you an overview of what's allowed now and what we know about what's going to be allowed in step 3 and step 4. So I'm just going to take my first Q&A session. If we try not to focus about what's going to happen next, I think we'll leave that one. But has anyone got any specific queries or questions around, you know, what's happening now and in the immediate future that I can help with?
There's no questions on the chat at the moment, Sarah, so I think we're all good at the minute.
Okay, I'll give everyone a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to jump in if there is anything. Sometimes it takes people a little while to get warmed up, doesn't it? But we will have some time at the end. So if there isn't anything now, I will carry on with my waffling. Right, here we go. So, is that a question coming?
Yeah, just she started.
That's fine.
Talking.
That's
fine. It's just, well, Showrounds. Somebody's asking about Showrounds. In terms of Showrounds, can you say a little more about what we need to do to be able to make this happen again?
So Showrounds for business events that are planned as part of the reopening are allowed. It's Showrounds for other events that currently aren't allowed until the venue itself is open. So I think they're mainly referring to weddings, but they haven't been specific about that. So hotels aren't open for indoor kind of activity yet. So unless you're viewing for a business event, the guidance currently suggests that you're not allowed until the 17th of May. Does that answer the question? And I'm very happy to send the snippet over. Emily, if you could make a note of who it was, and then I'll send that detail on.
Yeah, okay. And somebody's asking who in the local authority will block a meeting?
So it's the safety advisory group system, really. So historically, the SAG group would only meet for massive, great big outdoor carnivals and big public events. And they are a safety group. They work with the police and all that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing and what we're predicting is that the councils and the local authority are going to get much more involved for much smaller events and will be focused a lot more on indoor events because the risk is higher indoors. So anything, you know, under a certain number, unlikely to cause much problem or not even get noticed. But if you're, you know, heading towards the 400s, that sort of, you know, if you're doing, I think a good thing is if it's the biggest thing that venue has done, that's probably a good time to have a chat to the venue and say, look, have you run this past the local authority? Are you licensed for this many people in the COVID world? And just start having that conversation earlier rather than later.
Okay, and then we've got, is there guidance or templates for COVID level risk assessments?
Yes, there's so much out there. We've got lots on our website that we've collated from different bodies and our own templates and things like that. So you can head over there, brightspaceevents.co.uk, to sign up for the hub, and then you can see everything that's on there, which will basically talk you through the process. There's 3 different types of guidance, and this it's all covered in our course as well. But yes, there's a lot of information out there to help you do these assessments.
I'll put the hub link on the chat in a minute.
Oh, good idea. Yes.
So, and then someone said, so a corporate event in September, we couldn't show them round at the moment. Is that right? Is that right?
No, a corporate event, you're okay to do a show round. It's if it's not a business event, you're not allowed to do a show round.
Okay. Will the venue have direct communication with the LA to advise them to decide if it's compliant?
We would hope so. That's what we think is probably your easiest route as an organizer to the correct council and to the correct person, is to talk to your venue, because the venue will know them because they're licensed and they'll have gone through that process. So it's definitely something to do through your venue.
Okay, and does catering have to be table service from the 17th of May?
Oh, good one. I don't know. It does at the moment. I don't think we have guidance that gives that level of detail beyond the 17th of May for business events.
Okay.
That's all I can say right now. But again, Emily, if you could take a note of who that was, I can find out.
Yeah, okay. So local authority, EHOs and authorised COVID compliance officers have the authority to enforce on public health grounds. So that's just somebody
Smashing,
saying,
yes.
yeah, brilliant. Are showrounds currently only permitted for a specific business event, i.e. if dates are given and holding space, or can agents, corporates do showrounds to become familiar with the venue?
Good question. I don't think it goes that specific. My interpretation of the spirit of the guidance is no. They're trying to focus activity on stuff that's business and happening rather than they're trying to reduce the number of show rounds that are happening. So I'd say general show rounds, probably not, but I don't think there's anything specifically making that difference.
Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to do sort of fam trips or something outside, then that would be okay or not okay?
Where I don't know on that one. It depends where it would sit, because it's you could fit it under the outdoor hospitality guidance, as a, if your numbers are less than 6, you could kind of say, well, we're doing it under that guidance. But if you start looking at the business meetings guidance, then it's not essential, so it wouldn't be allowed yet. This is what I mean about, you get these kind of crossovers where some guidance you could say yes and some guidance you could say no. So if anyone's got a specific on that, I'm happy to pick up and see what they want to do and how it could possibly be allowed. But I can't answer now, I'm afraid. It's too complicated.
Okay, I'll make notes and we can get back in touch. Okay, that's it for now, I think.
Okay, brilliant. Well done, everyone. Well done for getting involved. Okay, so I am screen sharing still, so good. You can still see that grid. The next thing to talk about really in terms of legislation, because I get lots of questions about this. What is our kind of compliance and what's our duties under the law at the moment? So coronavirus COVID risk is covered by all existing health and safety legislation. And then it's got specifics that are covered under the health protection, which is the coronavirus legislation. So it's kind of belt and braces, really. And actually, if we look at, this is the management regs which are attached to the Health and Safety at Work Act. So it's 1974, it's been around forever, and these regulations were 1999, so they're not going anywhere. This gives you a responsibility to keep your employers and your people affected by your work safe. And this specific one says you have a legal requirement to carry out a risk assessment. And if you're a certain size, you have to write it down. Now, this is across the UK. This isn't just England. And interestingly, I found out on my talk with MySbook, Raf told me, the DW, and I've checked it since, and it's awful, because the DWP themselves were actually found to be in breach of sections 2 and 3 of the Health and Safety Act in August because of a lack of social distancing, and they were issued with fees to cover the cost of that investigation. So it doesn't have to be included in the coronavirus legislation to be a legal requirement. It is, the risk of COVID transmission is covered under normal health and safety. So this is the regulation 5, which says you have to write it down if you've got 5 or more employees. The specific COVID coronavirus legislation is here. So it's regulation 6, and it says that the gathering organizer or manager has a requirement to undertake the required precautions for the purposes. And the first requirement is that the gathering organizer or manager has carried out a risk assessment that would satisfy regulation 3, which we've just looked at. So they link the coronavirus risk assessment legal requirement, they link that to the health and safety regs anyway. The second requirement is the gathering organizer or manager has taken all reasonable measures to limit the risk of transmission, taking into account the risk assessment and any guidance issued by the government. So this is your current, it's been in every version of the coronavirus legislation. We don't understand why it would be removed, but it's there. And the interesting definition really is that the manager is defined as the person responsible, hang on, for the management of the premises on which the gathering takes place. So there's a debate always, should the venue do this or should the organizer do this? Both. You're both mentioned in the regulations, the gathering organizer or manager. So it really does, there's no help for us in the law about who should be doing it. We should both be doing it, because there's always a manager if we're indoors, and there's also a gathering organizer. So the other thing that, and I've just done that bit there, so you can see there, it's one of these lovely legislation things. It doesn't actually say anything else. Gathering organizer, in relation to a gathering, means the person responsible for organizing the gathering. It just kind of defines itself. But the manager one is interesting. And the final legislation is what we've kind of covered and I had a few questions on, which is about the health protection number 3 regs, which give the LA power to shut events down on the public health grounds. So it doesn't matter how good your precautions are, if they're not happy with your risk assessment, if they're not happy with how you've set this up or how you've justified this event can take place, they can they can shut you down up and it's in force up until the 17th of July at the latest, that one. I'm just going to whip forward, looking at the time. Apologies, everybody. So this is my crystal ball area now, where I'm just going to talk about purely my opinion on what I think might happen. The need for risk assessment is going to remain. They can't take away all the legal limits and then just let everybody crack on. They will keep that responsibility with the corporates to keep people safe. I really do believe that. The limits on how many people are allowed to gather are what's going to be lifted. And as I've mentioned, face masks and social distancing are a completely separate issue that we just need to keep an eye on. It's likely to end up being down to your individual risk assessment whether those things are required. Those dates might change. I think variants of concern is our biggest uncertainty at the moment. That's the thing to really keep eyes on. And the other thing I see sort of being hopefully getting better in a way with the risk assessment side is that it will become part of your normal assessment. At the moment, it's a standalone assessment, but I think that the measures won't be as complicated and we won't need such a lengthy process to carry out that assessment. But I think the process behind it will still need to be there. Things like, safety information going out as part of your invite. People need the confidence to attend. And they do have a different attitude to risk, something that they're happy to do in their personal life. They might not be so happy to do for work unless you've made a really conscious effort to make them feel safe. We've talked about talking to the LA. You might not have previously needed to do it, but it's the sort of thing that's worth thinking about, certainly for larger events. And then the real big one is testing and vaccine certification. As I mentioned, I think the fact that the government trial isn't using status certification, but is using testing is a very good indication of where we might end up going with this. But the other thing is that the government might not mandate this sort of stuff. It might just become the norm. And there becomes an industry standard that you're expecting to get tested, you're expecting to have to show something that says whether you've been vaccinated. And if you're the outlier who doesn't do that, then people won't feel that great, coming to your events. And I think the other thing to think about here is reputational risk, because if you don't make people safe. If they walk in and kind of suddenly think, oh, whoa, what's going on here, then the messages that gets back out into the market were could be very negative about your brand and your event. So do be aware of all those different things that we can see that might be on the horizon, and make that all part of your discussions as you start talking to clients. And I think I'd really urge caution and awareness and plan B's and C's and D's, because it's much easier to come back from that than it is to suddenly have to redo things because everything has changed, or suddenly have really difficult conversations with your client because everybody was working on we're going to turn back time on the 21st of June. We're not going to go back in time. COVID is here. There's been updates on both the guidance and some of the industry guidance recently. So you do need to really keep your eyes on it, and just be prepared to be agile and make sure that you've got budget allocated as well for if things need to change. You're going to, a contingency budget is a wonderful thing, particularly at the moment. So we do offer the training courses, like I said, but there's tons of information out there on the HSE website, on the government website, and on the industry association pages. So do feel free to go and have a look on there. The courses that we offer, the full course is for event planners who are carrying out those risk assessments and will need the detail behind the process, and will really need to get under the skin of how that works and their legal responsibilities, etc. So that one includes a actual training session with me in a small group on Zoom. But there's also another one which is more about awareness raising and more for people who are in every other area of the industry, but not necessarily carrying out those risk assessments. So for clients, for sales teams, for venues, suppliers, anyone, and clients, anyone who needs to know what's happening behind the scenes and absolutely needs the confidence to be able to talk about how these things are going to happen, but doesn't need to actually physically do risk assessments. So we're actually as well offering a discount for those people who are here today on the online course. So it's 2 hours, it's all online, you can do it at your own pace. It's a 30% discount that we'll offer. It's valid for a week, but it is unlimited. So you can pass it around to as many people as you think might be interested. And that code is webinar30. So I think Emily's going to put the link up, and we'll send you something afterwards as well. I have got a few minutes. I'm happy to stay on. So if people want to stay on for a bit to get through questions, that absolutely works for me. Oh, and we've got a Facebook group, which is a place to everybody just chat about all the different things that are going on about live and what can we do and are we allowed to do this and how do I get around that. So if you want to jump in there, hashtag back to live events on Facebook. It's a great place to hopefully build this discussion around how do we get back live. I'm going to stop and say, right, questions?
Okay, so someone's asking, so is it not down to the client if they sign the venue contract?
What, to do the assessment?
That was in relation to, something you were talking about earlier.
We haven't had, no one's sort of tested that definition legally yet. But I think if HSE came in and said to an agent, well, who's organising the event? You have to answer that honestly. If the client is organising the event, if they are a really hands-on team and you're just brokering some suppliers and venue finding, then yes, the client is organising it. So the client has the responsibility together with the manager, i.e. the venue. If, however, you are organising the bulk of the event, but they're just paying and signing directly, then HSE could look at you very, very quizzically if you said, no, they're the organiser, but your name was on documents, all the emails. So I think it's one of those where you have to look at it in the spirit of the law, who's organising the event. And that's the answer, because the law doesn't give you any more than that.
Yeah. Okay, and then we've got somebody asking if the slides are going to be available afterwards. Or
The video is, but we don't release the slides. The graphics available if that's what you're after. If you need the thing, I don't know what to call it, the grid, that's available. Have we put that on the hub yet, Em, or is it just on our socials?
It's just on socials. We can put it on
But
the
we
hub.
could put it on the hub, couldn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole video, the whole webinar will be loaded onto YouTube, so I can share that link as well for anyone who wants it. Okay, and at the bottom it's just people sort of just really making recommendations, which is brilliant. There's Rebecca, who I know has done one of the courses. She says the course is fun and
yes, hi Rebecca. Oh, nice to see you.
She can now write a risk assessment, which is exactly what we want. So
that's the idea.
Yeah, so the rest of it is just all praise for you, really.
Oh, well, very well. Just read it out word for word. That's fine. We can use that to fill the last 4 minutes. I don't mind. Okay, well, if there's anything, like I said, I am very happy to answer questions. You know, I like to think I'm a bit of an expert on this stuff. So rather than you spending hours and hours trawling through stuff, give me a shout. And if I don't know the answer, I'll at least be able to send you a link to the right place instead of you literally starting from scratch. And what we will do is those specifics that I wasn't quite sure of earlier, I'll send you, like I said, the correct link so that you can see exactly what applies to your specific situation. And that's what's really important here. You know, this wonderful industry we're all in is so varied. I think that's one of the reasons most of us are in it, because nothing's the same, and there's no black and white answer to a lot of this. So yeah, I'll follow up on those questions.
Yeah, we've got notes of those. So brilliant. That's
all right, everybody. Great to see you. Enjoy your weekend. Hooray! Look at that. Last bit of Friday to go, and then we're there.